Nigeria's 2023 borrowing plans at risk as creditors dry up. Debt servicing by Nigeria's Eurobond rises by 86%. Nigeria's inflation hits 20.52%, the highest figure since 2005. These and many more have been on the front burner for a while now. With the country surviving two recessions, one in 2016 and the second in 2020, which was occasioned by the COVID-19 pandemic, the country continues to struggle with rising cost of living, a huge debt burden, and an economic climate which some have described as discouraging to both local and foreign investors, and even more difficult for business startups. My name is Hamza Idris, and you are watching Daily Politics on Trust TV. On this program, we discuss issues around politics, policy, and governance. Do well to stick around, as it promises to be an interesting edition today, because we are going to look at Nigeria's economy and how we got here. We are joined by Jamilu Muhammad, an author, economist, and public commentator. We are also joined virtually by Dr. Dapel Zuhumnan. He's a researcher and a development economist. He's joining us from London. Welcome to the program, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Good. We'll take a quick break now, and when we return, the discussion commences. Do stay on, please. Welcome back. This is Daily Politics on Trust TV. Jamilu, the president is expected to present the 2023 budget on Friday. And today, we woke up with news all over that the windows for Nigeria's borrowing, they're actually drying up. How do you think the president will now reconcile what he's going to present, considering that it is going to be a deficit budget and the stories we have?
I think the issue of lending and borrowing is beyond economics. Economics only is not the platform upon which lending and borrowing is discussed. Okay. Lending and borrowing has other arms in politics and also in diplomacy. It is barely impossible to say that the avenue of Nigeria's borrowing or our lenders are drying up is barely impossible.
Okay.
The politics there and the diplomacy there would not allow that kind of condition. So the president, despite the huge budget deficit proposed for this for the coming year, I think we still have a leverage to play around. The leverage being that we still have we can still have a revision plan based on our medium-term expenditure
okay. Framework. Yeah.
Yes, we still have we can still have review plans there. But if to say we are not going to do that, we still have a plan, or we can still have a plan
okay.
without going for outright external borrowing. Okay. Our internal borrowing alone would still foot the budget as it is now being presented. I think we don't have to panic over this.
Yeah. Yes. You see, Jamilu, for our debt servicing cost on foreign bonds made up of 44.86% of total debt service in the first quarter of 2022, and it was 76% of total external debt service by the second quarter of the same year. This was the figure we were able to excavate. Today, when we saw the danger, because many newspapers carry the report that the external borrowers are really skeptical. So you still believe that using diplomacy we should be able to make a headway?
Yes, definitely. You see, when you structure an economy, normally, the design of an economy, you design it around the economy itself, diplomacy, and then politics.
Yeah.
Lending, lending is a framework, it's a main framework of economics. So what you have to understand is the lenders themselves are doing business.
Yeah.
It is not good to say lending itself is purely economics. Some lenders lend for diplomatic purposes.
Okay.
Some lenders lend for political purposes.
And
some
for
lenders
interest.
for economic purposes. So when you design your economy, you design to look at what percentage of borrowing would fit the economy itself. What percentage of borrowing is diplomatic? What percentage of borrowing is political? In our own case today, you see, compare with the global outlook. America is written under a debt of about $20-something trillion.
Wow. You can't even convert it in naira, for instance.
You see, so you cannot say lending itself or borrowing itself or lenders themselves are drying up. If you say that, it means business, economic business has stopped.
All right.
The only problem would be what would be the diplomacy to use and what would be the politics to use. But the economic borrowing itself would still have to be there.
Okay, Dr. Daipel, are you with us? In March this year, Nigeria acquired 1.25 billion naira Eurobond from the international capital market, making the country the first African country to access the market in 2022. A report by some national dailies showed this. I'm sure you must have read what the newspapers reported today, the inching closer to closing the windows available for Nigeria to borrow more. I'm asking this in view of the presentation of the budget by the president on Friday. How do you think he can navigate his way?
So, first of all, let's understand the caveat here. Foreign debt is a primary concern and not domestic debt. It's easy for us to handle our domestic debt because the rules governing it rest with the country. But when it comes to external debt, that's where the challenge is. And people often, say government is borrowing to pay salaries. I don't think that should be a concern because Nigerian workers are paid in local currency. So that is only going to raise domestic debt and not external debt. And our external debt is denominated in a foreign currency and it's governed by the country that governing the currency of the lenders. So if we have a situation like that, the primary concern is what are the options in bringing down the debt level that is external. Now, I don't think there should be much cause for alarm.
Okay.
It's rarely we see countries at risk of default. In centuries, you can find even 2 or 3 countries at risk of default. Nigeria has oil on the ground, and it can always extract from the oil to pay down its own debt. So it shouldn't raise so much alarm. It's a domestic debt that should raise alarm, which shouldn't. The government can print bonds, or there is a way it can change policies to address its domestic debt. But as for foreign debt, there shouldn't be much to be worried about, except that when we start to pay our external debt, it takes away part of the resources that is required to finance external relationships with the rest of the world, like paying for imports or defending a currency. So that's the only downside, but those things shouldn't push up the blood pressure.
So if I understand you very well, you're on the same page with Jamilu here in the studio that Nigeria cannot be said to be on red alert as far its ability to procure these foreign debts.
Yeah, I don't think it's on red alert. I wouldn't take hook, line, and sinker what the media puts out. Most of these opinions of journalists and politicians, they are not grounded in enough evidence. And they could be political as well. So Nigeria has been in worse debt situation in the past before there was debt relief in 2005, 2006. So this shouldn't be a reason that the country should keep borrowing without a focus. Let me say two things about our debt, because I've looked at some data on international debt statistics. First of all, there is this notion of voracity effects. And that is when a country is governed by elites that have no interest of the country at that and is rich in natural resources, but the institutions are weak. Substantial parts of proceeds from oil or resources, natural resources, would be used to fund political activities. So if you look at the data from years in run-up to elections, you see a pattern. So what's that pattern? Close to elections, you see Nigeria's withdrawal from its total debt commitment. It's higher than in moments where elections were not on the horizon. So for instance, in 2014, in the run-up 2015 elections, Nigeria's withdrawal of dollars from its total debt commitment was 10 times above the average for the past 50 years. And if you look at the same thing too in 2018, and run up to 2019 election, there was a withdrawal of roughly over $20 billion. The normal withdrawal from our debt was roughly $2 billion on average for the past half a century. But when it's close to election, you see a big jump of total. So when a country borrows, the entire debt that the country borrows is not delivered to the country at the same time. Yeah. You have to be withdrawing it annually from that disbursement. So close to election, you see a massive withdrawal from there. So it could be inferred that politicians were having access to this forex to finance their whole
not necessarily for economic development. Yeah, you have heard what he said, Jamilu. We found this that we did a report actually in Daily Trust that Nigeria borrowed 225 trillion naira in 20 years. This was between 2001, and 2021. And this borrowing was spread across federal, state, and local government areas. We are still asking for more. Dapel made mention of the debt relief we enjoyed, but in quick succession now we started accumulating more borrowings. Where is exactly the problem?
The problem is not about if Nigeria has a problem of borrowing. We've always known that borrowing and lending is a mainstream activity of a capitalistic system. You cannot remove lending and borrowing. It is an economic activity of its own in a capitalist economy.
You can call it the oxygen of the economy.
Something like that. So whatever our buoyancy, whatever our wealth, we will still go for borrowing. As I have said, if we don't borrow for the economy, we'll definitely borrow from a diplomatic point of view. We would also borrow from a political point of view. These lenders would approach you. Even if you don't approach them, they would approach you because they too need to run their economies. So because of that, they would create one activity, one economic activity for development, so to say. Sometimes the way to look at borrowing and lending is when you borrow, you are actually spending your future.
Okay.
Yes. When you borrow, whenever you borrow, you are spending your future. So it means instead of spending what you have now, you have gone to borrow from your children, or you have gone to borrow the resources of your children to spend now. If they come, whatever happens, I don't know. But sometimes, if you borrow for economic purposes, you can borrow from the future, plan for the future, and then go ahead. So borrowing in itself is not wrong in economics.
Okay.
What is wrong is when you borrow for economic purposes and then you spend for other purposes or you squander. That's where the problem is. So it's not that there was debt relief for Nigeria, then we were on ground zero, and then now we have come back borrowing again. Of course, we can look at our economic exigencies and say, okay, this is what we require in the next 10 years. So let us borrow from the next 10 years and then plan our economy for now, so that borrowing in future may be less. But when we squander the money, that's where the problem is. So borrowing in itself is not the problem. It's how we utilize the money for borrowing.
Dapel, I have this feeling that assuming we are getting foreign investors coming to Nigeria, the need to borrow, at huge cost to the economy will reduce. And the president at UNGA, I think last month, he made mention that foreign investors are reluctant to come to Nigeria. How do you think this issue can be addressed?
Well, is to address those things that scare the investors away. One is political instability. You don't know what direction the next government will take regarding policies on investment. And so they are afraid the political climate may negatively affect the economic climate.
Okay.
And if that happens, their investments will be severely impacted negatively. And second reason is we don't have a very stable exchange rate systems. The institutions are not very strong. For instance, if an investor brings in the money and partners with a Nigerian to run a business, and the next day the Nigerian said, "You've not given me any money," or he breaks the terms and conditions, and you press charges in the law court, courts takes the process. It's frustrating for you to get anything out of it quickly on time. So investors are scared. So the thing is, we have to have the precondition to, pull in foreign direct investment is to create an enabling environment, and one of which is to have infrastructure on the ground, because infrastructure is going to lower the average cost of business and it's going to raise productivity. So if infrastructure is not on the ground, it's going to be difficult for investors to operate or bring in their cash. Money is very careful. It is looking for where it can feel comfortable and relax.
Okay.
So
money.
those conditions have to be created, and insecurity is one of the big problems that has to be addressed. Otherwise, it will be difficult to pull foreign investment into the country.
Okay, Jamilu, do you have something
fact,
to add to what he said in terms of okay, you are trying to say something, Dapel?
Yeah. So, and another thing too, it's the level of corruption of public servants or workers in the country can scare away investors. One of these British billionaires, Richard Branson, he pulled out his business from Nigeria. He was bringing an airline that perhaps by now it's been running, it would have expanded significantly in Nigeria, but he pulled it out and he said he would never come to do business in Nigeria because at every corner, bureaucrats, public servants are demanding kickbacks. They are saying grease our palms with silver. So he's not willing to do that because that will raise to the cost of his doing business. And until the government steps in to address these things point by point, line by line, and clear the path for investors, they will continue being scared of bringing their fortunes to invest in the country.
All right, thank you. Jamilu, I was asking whether you have something to add, because Nigeria is 23 now in this democratic dispensation, fair enough compared to what is happening in other climes.
I think Mr. Dapel has mentioned the basic problems. I think basically there are four. Infrastructure, insecurity, political instability, and then corruption. I think if we are able to address these 4 items, particularly, I think infrastructure is unlike in the past. Yes, there is infrastructural deficit, but I think we have moved on a little bit.
Okay.
In infrastructure.
Credit to the government.
Yes.
Maybe this administration?
Not only this administration, over time, possibly we say, this dispensation of politics from 1999 to date, we have moved a little bit more in infrastructure, in economic infrastructure. We have done that. And then if we are talking about the main problems are political instability and then corruption. These are the 2 main culprits. If you bring in insecurity actually, what bred insecurity to this moment is our political instability. With good political stability, I think we should be able to do away with insecurity. Part of this insecurity is attached to also a kind of political economy. Okay. You see, in Liberia, Sierra Leone, in the past, we used to have what is called blood diamonds. I think in Nigeria, we still have something like this. You can look at
oil bunkering.
And then you look at also, there are conspiracy theorists who say, okay, the insecurity we have around Northeast, Borno area, has to do with oil prospecting.
Like gold in the Northwest.
Like gold in the Northwest. So if you are able to plant good political structures that will handle political stability, develop political stability, I think most of this insecurity will go. So we will now be left with the main culprit, corruption. How do we now deal with corruption?
Okay, thank you.
That's a very big question.
Dapel, I should ask you this on the tax net. It is said that we are still not really taxing the right people in Nigeria to generate money in order to bridge the gap between our borrowings and what we are able to generate. Do you share this sentiment?
So, like I said previously, our main concern is external debt. If you tax Nigerians, you're collecting local currency. You're not collecting the dollar. We need the dollar to pay for our external debt and not Naira. And Nigeria cannot print the Naira either to pay for its debt, its external debt, because it will be considered counterfeiting, and the Naira is not a legal tender elsewhere except in our own country. So the idea of raising tax within our country is not a serious issue when it comes to dealing with debt, except local debt. And if, first of all, the government raises tax, in other words, the government is saying, you want to spend money as a private individual, we collect this money and spend on behalf of the individuals as government to provide social services for the people. Now, you are taking this money from the people, and in the process of taking it and spending it, substantial part is gulped by corruption in the process. And secondly, you cannot tax nothing. People have to earn income for you to tax from that income. If they don't have sources of income, you don't have so much flesh to get out of it. So you just have the bones and there is nothing to get out of it. So addressing unemployment, addressing poverty, addressing things that are that are impediments to raising welfare, they are preconditions to trying to raise tax. And if you're talking of tax base, it is difficult to, it's possible. Consultants have done it. States that engage consultants, they know how to get around raising tax base. But there is a default symbiotic relationship between Nigerians and the government. Nigerians care less about paying tax, and the government doesn't really spend much of the fortunes for the people. So they rely on oil proceeds. And I keep hearing people say, oh, this politician is spending taxpayers' money. He's not spending taxpayers' money. He's spending oil money because our revenue substantially comes from oil. Yeah. So expanding tax base is what I think consultants in taxes, they can do it fairly very well. But you have to have what to tax from. Other than that, it's going to be difficult. And if you try to expand tax base or jurisdiction, you could end up hurting the people you are supposed to help. You would, you'll be chasing market women to pay taxes on the little things they go. It's like robbing the poor and paying the rich.
Thank you very much. Jamilu, you have heard what he said. The complexities of even taxing people because you get Naira instead of the dollar. But we will take a short break, and when we return, the conversation continues. Stay with us, please.
Nigerian story.
If you are just joining us, this is Daily Politics on Trust TV. Remember, you can follow the conversation on our various social platforms on Facebook, Instagram, and watch us live on YouTube. Today, we are discussing Nigeria's economy and the way forward. We have in the studio Jamilu Muhammad, author and an economist, and then Dr. Dapel Zuhumnan. He's a researcher and economist based in the United Kingdom. Welcome back, Wala Jamilu. You heard what Dr. Dapel said in respect to taxing people in order to generate revenue. And he quickly mentioned that even the claim that politicians are just spending our money, taxpayers' money, is really not there. They are spending oil money. Now, oil companies are going out. They are moving to greener energy. What do you think should be done? Because it's the only biggest window we still have to maybe get the oil, sell it, and then get the foreign exchange in order to finance the economy.
We have failed even to harness the oil over time. Right now, you see, you even in oil, what should have been done? There are processes through the economics of oil. You prospect for oil, you explore it, then you prospect, then now you go into the production, then selling. See, what we are doing is we are only prospecting for crude oil and then selling it. So the value chain, we have cut the value chain possibly 10% into the value chain economy. We are getting only 10% of what we are supposed to get.
90 is Philpad or something.
We are throwing 90 to the external world through maybe refining of crude oil.
Yeah.
When you explorate for oil, you prospect, you get the crude oil. In refining, there are very many economic factors involved there. One is employment. And you also raise your tax base when refining. Through refining, and then you now cut the logistics of transporting in and out. So all these things are not there for us now. Right now, I don't think the focus should be oil.
Okay.
If the oil companies are moving away to greener pastures, not only moving away to greener pastures, also oil companies are also moving away from the technology we used to know, the mundane technology they use. Now we are moving into new technology of
green energy.
Green energy. Okay, so Nigeria has to look forward, has to look away. In fact, Nigeria should look only maybe about 10% of its GDP or less
through oil,
through crude oil business. Okay. The rest, that was why SAP, for instance, came.
Structural Adjustment
Program. It was abysmal anyway. It somehow failed, but the items there are items we could pick unutilised. Something like diversification of our economy into agriculture. One of the items that possibly worked in SAB was something like DFRI. There was
Director for Food, Road and Rural Infrastructure. Yeah.
It was a good item there, and it actually worked because the rural farmer was able to interface with the national economy. Now, while the boom was going on, the middle class found out that it has been left out. Then the middle class now started crying. That was how the middle class worked to now collapse the farmer again.
Yes.
So
he's still at the receiving end.
At the receiving end. So
Yes.
in this case now, if Nigeria, and this is what we are seeing right now,
Yeah.
the agricultural business is also growing,
Yeah.
or has grown tremendously over maybe 6-7 years.
Yeah.
Now, the oil business is not as if the oil business is going down. You'll find out that our oil exports has always been
Between that average.
between
Yeah.
that average,
Yeah, not
running
more than
between that
1.something
average.
million.
Maybe
Yeah.
2 million barrels per day,
Yeah.
1.8. If it falls too low, it becomes
Below 1
1.4
million, yeah.
or something like that.
Yeah.
But it has always been around that. Now, is the price that would be the problem.
Yeah,
But
which is really going down. I want to bring in Dapel here to talk if there is any nexus between the inflation we are witnessing in Nigeria. It's now over 20%, food prices and all that. Is there any nexus? Can you take us through some of these issues that are really, putting us on edge as far as maintaining the robust economy is concerned?
Okay, talking about inflation, there are two notions we need to correct. Number one is that middlemen are pushing up the prices. And secondly, that the dollar is responsible for rising prices. These notions are violated by data. But first of all, let's have at the back of our mind that what is driving the inflation trend in Nigeria is one component: food prices. There is a chart. If that can be shown,
yeah. We have inflation chart as you mentioned.
You could see that around the time that the border was closed, the gap between food inflation and non-food inflation was widening. So there was no sufficient supply predating the closure of the border, and so that pushed up food prices up. Now, there is a chart with 3 lines. That's the next chart to be shown. We're trying to understand the roots of rising food prices. So the data I use here, first of all, I should have said it from the onset. I use data from 2 major sources: Nigerian National Bureau of Statistics and then the Central Bank of Nigeria.
Okay.
So I looked at food prices across the 36 states and federal capital. So the South is driving the trend in rising food prices. It contributes roughly 70%.
Okay, the South.
To rise prices in the country. So that tells you the North has comparative advantage in food production than the South.
Okay.
Ironically, so they had comparative food advantage, production in food than the South. That means the North feeds the country, but ironically, the North is unable to feed itself because the food poverty rate in the North is higher than the food poverty rate in the South. In other words, more than 22 million people in the North are unable to spend roughly $200 a day on food, or roughly less than $50 on food, compared to just 2 million in the South. So we can see an irony playing out here.
Yeah.
From North you first fill your tank from the north. So that's why I compare pump prices in the north with food prices in the south. And you can see that as food prices as gasoline prices in the north rises, you see food prices also follow suit. In other words, raising pump price by roughly 1 naira raises food prices in the south by roughly 5 naira. So cost of transportation is a culprit, not the middleman and not the dollar. Why did I say not the dollar? Because out of the frequently consumed food items in the country, all the ones that are produced in Nigeria contribute only 85% to food inflation. So we don't import fish, dry fish, or we don't import Irish potatoes. We don't import maize. I don't think all these foods are cultivated in Nigeria. So the dollar should not be blamed for rising food prices in the country.
Wow.
And around the time that
Thank
the
you.
food prices...
Maybe I will ask Jamilu to chip in to give us his perspective of what you just displayed. You can see people have been blaming middlemen, people have been blaming the dollar, but practical information here from the data he collected from NBS and the Central Bank shows that beyond the middlemen, there is an existential problem, diesel transportation. Do you agree with that?
I do. Economic infrastructure, that is very basic. He gave an example of diesel. You see, around 1994, 5, 96, the federal government was trying to develop a transportation system around a rail network.
Yes.
Okay. Now, what happened? Certain Nigerians who have invested so much in the road transport system,
As haulage, yeah.
Road transport system, now decided that the government was trying to kill their businesses. Now, what would they do? They came to the government lobbying. Instead of the railway, why not find a way of accommodating us? How do you develop us? They started giving proposals. But the government insisted the best way to transport locally, most especially food items, is railway. Now they went doing their prayers.
For those who believe in it.
For those who believe in it, trying to lobby the government and so on and so forth. Now, what should have, you can blame the government and you can blame our so-called businessmen. Now, the businessmen would have come in through the railway system. Government concession rail stations to us. You can run the rail
transportation
itself. Give us the stations as our own businesses. Then now we would now divest the road transportation system. That could have worked. On the other hand, the government itself would have said, okay, we are now buying you off the road transportation system. Okay, bring your trucks. We'll buy them off.
Okay.
Yes. You want something to work. These people don't want it to work. You have to find your own way.
Okay.
You buy them off. Technologically, there are other ways of it. You can recycle them.
Or even export them to
other places. You could do that. Okay. And then now try to bring them in to the rail transportation system. But government failed and our businessmen failed. So the whole thing is our psyche.
And the blame game will continue until we address the existential
until we address
problem.
This particular issue of diesel shouldn't have been there. Our railway system should have been developed far more than even running we should have been running the modern railway system.
And we also, we also have the depots, petrol depots, all over the country that you can transport the diesel via pipelines, and then you only take them to...
The pipelines are not safe.
Yeah.
They are not safe too. And it is also more expensive.
Compared to train or to transportation?
Transporting them
is more expensive.
Is more expensive.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. What the government should have done by now? You see, this insecurity itself. This is why when insecurity comes in, you start thinking: is the insecurity political instability, or the insecurity in itself? Because you are talking about transporting oil through the pipelines, and someone thinks it is his own way of making money, or he doesn't, or somebody thinks he doesn't want it that way.
Very sad.
He attacks it.
Yeah. Let me go to the appel. Nigeria with huge GDP, and then still the inflation could not be addressed. What are the practical ways, in few words, that we can address this inflation? Yeah.
So thank you. First of all, let's just say, let's not be doing what would not deliver relief, and that is the central bank continually raising interest rates.
Okay.
Raising interest rates since April, and the inflation rate has been moving in tandem with the interest rate. So I think it's not a good idea for the CBN to keep raising interest rates, especially when it's predicted that economies are on the brink of recession. You don't launch in contractionary policy or tightening of the system like that. Moreover, these are election times, so the economy will self-stimulate itself because politicians will be spending heavily.
Okay.
So there are two practical ways, I would think. One, it's obvious from the problem we've analyzed. There's a short-term problem, short-term solution and a long-term solution. The short-term solution is, I would wish that maybe the Office of Economic Planning just design a questionnaire and recruit research assistants across the country and dispatch them to the markets. And there are a range of questions to be asked on this questionnaire, and it will help track the movement of prices and flag up at what point the prices are moving up. And if there is a government policy at a point that is pushing up the prices other than transportation, we can quickly identify and address it quickly. Secondly, is the long-term approach, which is the rail network that connects Nigeria's two commercial capitals. Okay. Which is Lagos, the north and the south. Studies have shown that rail transport has lowered interregional food price differences. So this project, it's going to be a game changer in the food chain industry and in transportation industry. So the government should reprioritize that project and fast track its completion and the launching, because it's going to play a significant role. And another short-term measure, I don't know if the government can quickly reintroduce subsidy on diesel, cost of transportation, and see how they can quickly address this problem. But with that, I just think that's what the government can do at the moment. But there are people with much more brighter ideas, I believe.
Thank you very much, Dapel. He mentioned three things: maybe a survey to be administered to find some of these reasons, because he believes that marketers are aware of this. And then the second one, revitalize the infrastructure, that is railway. And the third one, he said maybe reintroduction of subsidy on diesel. Today, if you go around Abuja, the gridlock in filling stations have resurfaced.
Yes.
People trying to get fuel, which is being subsidized. Is it a practical solution?
It is not. You see, subsidy in itself, I don't see subsidy as an economic item. I've never seen subsidy as an economic item. Subsidy has always been a social item, a welfare system, a sort of trying to appease the society. Okay. Most especially when you subsidize consumption. instead of subsidizing production.
But he was saying in order to bring food price, because this is what really bothers Nigerians now, high cost of food.
The problem with Nigeria is if you reintroduce subsidy in diesel, the subsidy will stay for another 40 years.
Okay.
There are these people in subsidy who think this is their own birthright to make money from subsidy.
So if I get you right, maybe you also share his idea of maybe fixing the infrastructure,
yes,
so that the economic forces will determine some of these things.
I do.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jamilu. We have run short of time. I want to thank you for coming to the program and for your informed perspective. Dr. Daipel, we also thank you very much for joining us via Zoom from London, and we thank you very much for your informed perspective. Viewers, this is where we come to the end of the program. Thanks you for watching, and do join us again. For now, I am Hamza Idris.